This is the Patriots Catch-22 podcast with Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I'm Evan Lazar. Evan Lazar.
Hello, everybody.
Nailed it. Joined as always by Alex Barth. That's a fit. That's a match. No risk it, no biscuit.
22.
Here is Evan Lazar and Alex Barth.
I don't know what I've done. I think I've made a mistake. Maybe I should not have exposed you to Joe Milton. All right, I don't know how much Joe Milton talk we're going to do. Why am I echoing? Is it that? There we go. Okay. I don't know how much Joe Milton talk we're going to do today. If you can't tell, it's Alex Barth in the host chair today on Catch-22. Evan is here, but he is sick. So 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, or no. Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, I was sick.
Yep.
Now, and then we had the Senior Bowl, so Evan was in Mobile. And now Evan is sick and can't come in. So let the conspiracy theory start that we can't be in the same room. But, I mean, you hear his voice. You heard my voice a couple weeks ago. He was obviously in Mobile. The evidence is there. But we're underway here on a brand new Catch-22 with obviously a ton to get to. Even though it's 3 weeks in a row, we can't manage to be in the building together. So we're going to be pretty heavy coaching staff front office today. Obviously, a lot has happened in that regard in the last week. Everything has happened in that regard in the last week. But we can get into some. I know you guys want to talk prospects with us, as you always do. We can get into some of that as well. 855-PATS-500 is the number if you want to call in. 855-PATS-500. That's 855-728-7500. Or you can email us at webradio@patriots.com. But in the meantime, Evan, where do you want to start? Coaching staff or front office?
We can start with the coaching staff, and just for the record, both of us have done this show sick now in the last couple weeks, and not all heroes wear capes, Alex. I think that we deserve some kudos for playing sick in these instances. No, I'm just kidding.
Your voice sounds much better than mine did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, for me right now, I can't get my body temperature to be at a normal level. I'm either super hot or super cold, and there's no in between.
Oh my God, who the hell?
Yeah, I was about to say we had a little fun with it. I think we were jumping the shark there. Let's thanks for that, Matt. Let's get into the coaching staff. You want to start coaching staff or front office?
Yeah, we can start the coaching staff.
All right. So the coaching staff, as it has been reported so far, we've got a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball. It's going to be Alex Van Pelt, who has been, I think, got hired after our last show, right? He got hired on, it was either Thursday night or Friday.
Thursday night, yeah. Thursday night.
So Alex Van Pelt's going to be the offensive coordinator. Ben McAdoo is going to be some sort of general assistant. We have T.C. McCartney. Mike Reese confirmed last night as or reported last night as the quarterback's coach. Scott Peters is the offensive line coach. Still waiting on running backs, receivers, and tight ends. We'll start with Van Pelt, who kind of came out of nowhere in this whole thing. It feels like that hire was a month ago with everything that's happened. Like, I feel weird going back through it here.
Right.
I don't mind the hire. I like that they went out and they got somebody with playing experience. I like that they got somebody who's experienced working with quarterbacks. I like the system that they run in Cleveland. Now, the play calling questions, and it's not that he's never called plays. I'll clear that up because I see a lot of people saying he's never done it. He did do it in Buffalo for a year. Now, it was 15 years ago. But he has done it, and he did it spot times in Cleveland when Stefanski was out with illness. That is a fair question, and we're going to need to see what he looks like as a play caller, because you can design a great offense. If you're not calling the right plays on Sundays within that design, it doesn't really matter. I think we all saw Josh McDaniels fall into that a couple of times during his career in New England. So, to me, like, it's an interesting hire. I'm not going to sit here and bash it. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a terrible hire because I don't think it is. Is it, beyond question? No. There's legitimate questions with a guy like this, but I think if they're a team that wants to develop a quarterback, and they do need to develop a quarterback, and whether that's a quarterback that's drafted third overall, a quarterback that's drafted on day 2, whether that's Mac Jones, that's another discussion. But there is going to be a quarterback here that needs developing. They're not trading for Patrick Mahomes, right? They got a guy that's experienced with developing quarterbacks, that experienced with working with quarterbacks. He runs a quarterback-friendly system, and he's run his own show offensively before, and I think in that sense it's encouraging.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you just said. I think it's disingenuous a little bit to come on here and be like, wow, what a home run hire, because let's face it, it wasn't on my list, right? Like it wasn't one of my preferred candidates. Not that my list was like the end all be all, but
Right.
At the end of the day, it's not the sexiest of hires. It's not the most innovative of hires. We're not talking about one of these young Zach Robinson, like young hotshot OC candidates out there that's going to be the next Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay or something like that. So is it inspirational? Is it, somebody that I think is going to completely come in here and reinvent how we think of offense and how they play offense? I don't necessarily think so. I think that their scheme has a lot of good things about it that we can get into that I do like. But it's not. I'm not over the moon about it, but I also, like you said, I'm also not sitting here and killing them for it either. I'm kind of lukewarm on it for the moment, and I think the biggest reasons why I like it are as this process continued for them, and they hire Jerry Springer to be the special teams coordinator.
Yeah,
he's young, he's never done it before. DeMarcus Covington, defensive coordinator, 34 years old, never done it before. They needed somebody in that coaching staff on the coordinator level, because the head coach, obviously we know who that is, that had some experience, that had a resume in the league, that's had experience with quarterbacks, that's developed quarterbacks, that's run an offense. I think that's where I was starting to gear more towards a little bit myself anyways, once it became clear that they weren't going to get the Zach Robinsons of the world, right? Like once those guys were out of the picture, and you started to think about, all right, what are the most important things? I think experience, knowledge, quarterback relationship. And I think that that's one thing that you look at a guy like Nick Caley, and I know that some people are reporting or surmising, I don't know if anybody's concretely reported that they wouldn't pay Nick Caley's freight, but that's sort of the report out there, right? Is that they wouldn't pay the contract that he wanted. But Caley's never worked with quarterbacks. He's also a young guy. He's also never coordinated an offense on his own before. That would have been a lot of inexperience and just a lot of daring sort of inexperience there on one coaching staff. So in a lot of ways, I think that there's a lot of things to like about Alex Van Pelt, and I do want to get into some of the X's and O's of what they did in Cleveland. And it's not Shanahan style. It's not McVay. But it isn't. It's adjacent. It's. They have so many branches off that tree at this point that it's part of the big tree, but it's kind of one of the little smaller branches towards the bottom. But they definitely do some of those things, marrying run with play action. Outside zone. Like those are some of the things that they have done in Cleveland that I would say that Stefanski does adhere a little bit to some of the Shanahan principles.
Yeah, all good points. I want to get to the X and O's, which is if you have any thoughts on the other offensive hires, T.C. McCartney, Scott Peters, or Ben McAdoo.
So Ben McAdoo, I feel like this happens in coaching, and I know that some people have said that this was on the record before those drafts, that he liked all those quarterbacks, right? Yeah. He wanted to trade up for Patrick Mahomes, and he wanted Josh Allen over Sam Darnold, and yada, yada, yada. But if those things are true, then that is encouraging, and it kind of you would understand almost why they would bring him and Alex Van Pelt in together, because now you have two guys that have a decent history with quarterbacks and working with quarterbacks and maybe even evaluating quarterbacks. And I think that can be really useful. I'm not the biggest Ben McAdoo fan from his time with the Giants. Obviously, I don't think anybody could look at his head coaching tenure with the Giants and be super gung-ho about it. But from what I understand, he's a good he's a good eye for quarterback talent, a good eye for offensive talent in general, from what they has been reported in the past. And that's something that we've talked about, that this team has struggled with, not just at quarterback, but at receiver, at tight end. They haven't really been a great evaluating team when it comes to offensive skill players. So maybe Ben McAdoo is somebody that can come in and help the front office out and kind of be a little bit of a dual role there of coaching these guys, but also having an eye for the talent a little bit as well.
I'll give you the one thing on McAdoo that interests me, and this is a little outside of the box. And yeah, I mean, the quarterback stuff's impressive, but I don't know. It sounds a little bit to me like Bill Polian saying he knew Brady was a first-round pick.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Where McAdoo's interesting to me is, look, Tom Coughlin's not Bill Belichick, obviously. But he's a guy that, he's the greatest coach in franchise history. He won multiple Super Bowls. He was there for a long time. He was highly revered. Like, that's not an easy guy to replace by any means. And McAdoo had to do it. And it didn't go well. He got let go late in his second year. But, I mean, there is no apples to apples for replacing Bill Belichick. There isn't. But McAdoo's kind of come about as close as you're going to get in the NFL. And I don't think the weight of replacing Bill Belichick is just reserved for Gerard Mayo. I think that falls on DeMarcus Covington. I think that falls on Alex Van Pelt being the first post-Belichick staff. Here's somebody who has navigated those waters before. And again, like, take that for whatever it's worth. I'm not necessarily saying that's the be-all, end-all, but when I look at McAdoo, that to me is where the true value is as a resource for what these guys are going to go through this year in terms of external pressure. Because he's faced, and again, not the same. Belichick, Coughlin, not the same, but he's gotten about as close to having that experience as anybody you were realistically going to get to come join the staff. And I think there's some value in having him as a resource in that regard. I know that's the kind of stuff you hate. I can't tell if you're rolling your eyes at me. You probably are, but that's what stands out about McAdoo to me.
I think there's some things that, we've discussed in the past. Gerard Mayo, to me, with these two hires is recognizing where his own holes are currently as a coach. I think he's recognizing that he needed a lot of help on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
That he needed two guys that knew what they were doing and have been around the block a little bit, have been to multiple stops, have coached, all different types of players, all that kind of stuff. And you have two guys now in McAdoo and Van Pelt that I know a lot of Patriots fans are going to hear this and want to, throw up a little bit. But the reality is that I think both those guys can run the offensive side of the ball. And they have the experience and they have the coaching chops and they have the resumes to be able to garner that sort of responsibility. One of them has been a head coach in the NFL before. Alex Van Pelt's coordinated offenses in multiple stops. Both those guys have the clout, the resumes to be able to run offense in the NFL. And Gerard Mayo, I think, is recognized that he's not ready to be the CEO of the football team just yet, where he's got his hand in every little thing. And he's Bill Belichick that's, crossing these T's over here in the offensive meetings, then walking over to the defensive meetings and dotting those I's and that sort of thing. Like, he's not ready to do that. So this should allow, in theory, Gerard Mayo to mostly focus on what he does best, which is motivate the team and coach the defense. And hopefully that means that the defense will be just as good as it was last year, if not better.
And I think that's a key point when people talk about Van Pelt's lack of experience as a play caller. I think they conflate that with lack of experience as an offensive coordinator, and those are two different things. An offensive coordinator is going to design the offense, implement it, both on a macro level and on a micro level, week to week. Hey, we want to emphasize this week. We want to emphasize that. We want to attack this. We want to stay away from that. And then basically give that to the play caller if it's a different person. So Van Pelt's put an offense together before. McAdoo's put an offense together before. One other member of the staff I want to touch on real quick before we get into what this thing might look like, and that's T.C. McCartney, who's reportedly going to be the quarterback's coach. When this hire, or yesterday it was reported at first they were targeting him.
Yeah.
I was a little confused because we just talked about it. Alex Van Pelt and McAdoo. It felt like they were targeting like true experienced quarterback developers. And T.C. McCartney is a little bit out of that mold. Yes, he played quarterback at LSU, but he was a scout team quarterback. He was a general assistant in San Francisco for a few years, including under Shanahan. Spent 1 year as a quarterback's coach in Denver, then was a general assistant again in Cleveland, and then was a tight ends coach for the last 4 years. What his resume to me doesn't look like the resume of a quarterback's coach. It looks like the resume of an offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, and I said this when they hired Van Pelt, Evan, I think I texted this to you, that once they made that hire, we had talked about how the quarterback coach hire was going to be so important. once they made that hire, to me it was, all right, now I need the offensive line coach. And I think we both really like Scott Peters.
Yeah.
His background with MMA and combat sports and all that.
And just like the videos of him wanting to like kill people on Twitter, like not literally, like in football terms.
No, just like using like a pole on his house as a blocking sled. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
So to me, I was like, all right, like Van Pelt's more or less going to be your quarterback's coach. I look at T.C. McCartney and I look at his resume and I look at his background. Again, he's spent significant time with Kyle Shanahan. He's coached multiple positions on the offensive side of the ball. I wonder if this is kind of, all right, Van Pelt's got the quarterbacks. We're going to have this guy here so that if it goes well with Van Pelt and he's gone, because if it goes well with him, he's going to be head coach in at least 3 years maximum, right? T.C. McCartney to me is the succession plan. T.C. McCartney to me is the guy you're grooming that if it goes well and Alex Van Pelt takes a head coaching job, this is your next offensive coordinator. Because his background strongly suggests somebody who's a West Coast, even borderline Shanahan OC. He just needs a little more experience. He's just not quite there yet. And this is a way to maybe get him some of that experience. So it's an interesting hire to me. It's if it goes well, it's brilliant. If it doesn't, there's a real chance we're sitting here in a year saying they should have gotten somebody with more experience around the quarterbacks. It was too much on Alex Van Pelt's plate. But I do think that he's somebody who, if it goes well, you're going to hear quickly talked about as an offensive coordinator, either here if Van Pelt jumps or elsewhere. Like he can be their Gerard Johnson, basically.
Yeah, I think you look at it and there's been a lot of track record of guys going from tight ends coaches to offensive coordinators.
Right.
Just because of all the responsibility on the tight ends coach from a run and pass game perspective. But in a lot of ways, still isn't like quarterbacks coach a little bit of a promotion. Like that just feels like a little bit like an upward promotion. And I think if you're T.C. McCartney, you probably wanted that a promotion to come to New England. Like I don't know if New England was necessarily at the top of his list of places that he could go. He could go latch on to Kyle Shanahan's staff in San Francisco and replace Clint Kubiak and probably be head coach in 2 years just because he knew Kyle Shanahan one time, right? So like you look at these things, and I think that in order to get him in the building, they gave him a more prominent title,
right,
of quarterbacks coach, and I'm okay with that. I do want to touch on Scott Peters though, because so Brandon Thorne is my go-to offensive line guy. Does a great job covering offensive line play, both college and draft and NFL. He was like immediately tweeted, "This is a great hire. Scott Peters deserves to run his own room. He's been a rising star under Bill Callahan in Cleveland for a couple years now. So that's really encouraging. And then you just read up and you watch this guy do his job and at work and in some of these clinics that he's done. And you mentioned like the pole in the backyard of his house, and he's just using it as a blocking sled, and looks like he could probably go in there and play guard next week or something like that. The way that he was, firing out of his stance and throwing punches and things. I'm encouraged by this. I like his background. I like his attitude. I think he's somebody that just screams offensive line coach at you, right? Like he's just, we've been joking back and forth with like the whole kneecaps thing and things like that. But that, I kind of roll my eyes at that type of stuff usually, mostly because I hate Dan Campbell. But like when it comes to offensive line coaches, like that's what you want your offensive line coach to be like Dante Scarnecchia. Right. Like you want him to freaking, spit out fire. Like that's just like what you want your O-line coaches to be like. And I think that Scott Peters definitely fits that bill. So out of all of these assistant coaching hires, taking Van Pelt and McAdoo out of it, I think that he's the most encouraging one by far.
All right, so put it all together, Evan. What's this offense going to look like?
Well, I do think that what's encouraging about what Cleveland did, and I know it's tough because yes, he wasn't the play caller, and it was Stefanski's offense. Like that is Stefanski's offense in Cleveland, and here they're running the Stefanski system. But if they had hired Zach Robinson, then we would still be talking about the McVay offense and how that's the offense he's built in, right? Like that's the offense he's been born in. Mike McCarthy, it's not exactly the same, but it's from a passing game standpoint, it's pretty similar from what they did in Green Bay. And I think the one thing that's encouraging is that they do a really, really nice job of marrying together run and play action pass, and they are an explosive down the field vertical passing game off of play action. Like, this is not a team that is just trying to get 12 15 yard chunks at a time off play action pass. This is a team that wants to push the ball down the field for explosives off of those play actions. So they'll run some outside zone. They're not as they weren't as outside zone heavy last year as they have been in the past, but that's still their base run scheme is outside zone. So they'll run outside zone, and then they'll run bootleg stretch off of it, right? And then they'll run a lot of the different Shanahan types of route combinations down the field to generate big plays. And you watch that film really towards down the stretch with Joe Flacco. The one guy that obviously really sticks out continuously is David Njoku, and they were hitting big play after big play after big play against David Njoku off of play action. I love the bootlegs. They run a good amount of gap now, counter. They run a little pin pull, and then they run all those same blocking schemes. And then they just have counter actions off of them with the play action fakes. So even though it's not as motion heavy, it's not as exotic, it's not, when you watch like a Shanahan, Mike McDaniel run game, there's guys motioning all over the place. There's weird, odd blocking angles. There's different setups, things like that. It's not quite as exotic or as creative as that, but the principles are the same. We're going to show you run formation, run block, and then we're going to bootleg off of it, or we're going to play action off of it, and we're going to generate big plays down the field. So when you look at all these things, I think what's encouraging about it is that you can see a system, you can see the game plan, you can see a real systemic way of how they like to get to their things, and they buy into it. They are a run-first team, but they buy into it to run the play action off of it, which I think in a lot of ways, Alex, like, you should be excited about that. This is real man football, like you like to say. Like, this is big boy football. They're going to want to run the ball, and they're going to want to run the play action off of it, and really that's what the real crux of the offense is creating those explosive plays. And then when they get into pass situations, whether it's third down, short yardage, obvious pass, 2-minute, that sort of thing, they'll run West Coast type of offensive staples in the passing game. But they're not trying to generate too many explosives. And when I say that, it's not like obviously every team wants to generate explosive all the time.
Right.
But their West Coast pass game, like in, 3rd and 5, is really just to pick 6 yards up, right? Like, if they get extra yards from it, great. Their 1st and 2nd down play calling and the explosive plays off play action, that's where they want to really hit the chunk plays and move the offense. So as we get into it some more here, I think one of the cool things that we can talk about is how this fits, draft prospects, free agency, that sort of thing. Because I do think that if this is exactly how they're going to play offense, then it does. Certain people definitely fit it a lot better than other people in the draft.
And I think the big thing, I mean, draft aside, just in general, and I'm with you, they're going to run to set up the pass. I know you're going to roll your eyes at that, but they're going to run to set up the play action. Yeah. Run to make that work, and then try to hit their explosives off that. The tight end has been a huge part of what they've done the last 4 years.
Yeah.
All of the previous 4, tight end was among their top 3 leading receivers, was one of their top 2 receivers, 3 of the last 4. Njoku led the team in catches last year. They've got to get their version of David Njoku. And whether that's Jatavion Sanders, I look at Austin Hooper's a free agent. He had success with Alex Van Pelt in Cleveland. I'm blanking on the other Cleveland tight end that you texted me about.
Harrison
Bryant, who I think you really liked in the draft that year, right? Weren't you a big Harrison Bryant guy?
That was the Devin Asiasi, Dalton Keene draft.
Yeah, we'll call it the Cole Kmet draft.
Maybe they fixed that mistake and get the guy they should have drafted all along.
So I look at like the 3 linchpins of that Browns offense. Well, there's 4. Like, I don't want to leave out Nick Chubb, but 1, they were very successful without Nick Chubb last year, and 2, I'm not saying Ramondre's Nick Chubb, but Ramondre's a really good running back. Like, I don't think they need to upgrade at running back to make this offense work. Now, they get a pass catching back, but that's another story. They got to get their version of David Njoku. They got to get their version of Amari Cooper. And they got to get a tackle. And that sounds like a lot. And, I mean, it is. You can do all that this offseason. That's not unrealistic if you go about it correctly. You can get those 3 guys this offseason and still honestly take a quarterback third. I know a lot of people probably heard get your Amari Cooper and thought Marvin Harrison Jr. You can go out and sign Michael Pittman, Calvin Ridley. Like, they kind of revitalized Amari Cooper. And we'll still see who the wide receivers coach is. But go out, get your true X, of which there's a couple available in free agency. Tackle, maybe that's where you go at the top of the draft or in the top 100. Maybe they trade for Jack Conklin. I know we talked about that a little bit before even Van Pelt was in the picture. Maybe it's somewhere else in free agency. You bring Onwenu back on the other side. And then what position? And then tight end. We talked about a couple guys they could sign, or like I think Jadeveon Sanders. I had David Njoku as a comp for him before all of this. So now there's literally a David Njoku type player. Like, there you go. I wanted to ask you this, and you can respond to that whole plan, but specifically on Onwenu. Last time we had talked about this, we still thought they were trying to do that Shanahan thing, and you talked about Onwenu maybe not being an ideal fit for that. Now that it's going to be a little more ground and pound, is Onwenu a better fit for the Van Pelt offense? Is he a guy you're willing to commit to as a tackle in the Van Pelt offense?
I'm not sure at tackle. I still think he's such a good lineman that they would make it work. And like I said, last year, they ran a lot more gap. They were a lot more gap heavy. They were one of the more gap heavy offenses in the league the last couple of years, actually. They still run a lot of outside zone, though, and I still look at their film and say, you know, the horizontal stretch and the aim point outside the tackle, like that's still kind of the basis of what they do, right? Like that's like the setup that they want to present to the defense.
Right.
And they still run a lot of outside zone. They still run a lot of pin pull, which is basically just outside zone tagged a little bit differently. And they still run a lot of crack toss. So all those 3 of those schemes are outside on the perimeter. You know, a big thing about the Shanahan offense, and Stefanski is, I think, a subscriber to this as well, and so has Van Pelt in turn. They want the DBs to be the guys that have to make the tackles at the point of attack, right? They look at it and they say, why are we going to run at 330-pound DTs and linebackers whose jobs it is to stop the run when we can run at corners and safeties and make them stop the run for, you know, on the perimeter. So let's get the ball outside. And I still think at their core, that is what the Browns have been over the last couple of years. But I think that Onwenu can be a fit in that scheme as more of a, not necessarily the guy that's on the move all the time in some of those schemes, but a guy that, for example, you know, when you run pin pull, you have guys that are, you know, pulling around guys that are pinning down. Like, there's no reason why Onwenu can't be the one pinning somebody down, right? Like, it just, you have to scheme it a little bit differently. I wouldn't necessarily encourage him to be the guy in space, but he's a very good player, and I wouldn't let him walk simply because it doesn't feel like he's a scheme fit. If Mike Onwenu's not a scheme fit for you, then your scheme stinks. Like, make it work. Like, it's that simple. But you mentioned a couple of the linemen with the Browns. Jack Conklin, I think, is a really interesting trade target, or maybe even cap casualty in Cleveland if they decide to give our guy DeJuan Jones the keys there at right tackle. He's getting up there in age, but would be a nice kind of bridge to a younger player that maybe they draft this year. And then Garyon Conley, who played a decent amount last year at left tackle. Almost, I think he was really their primary starting left tackle in Cleveland last year. I think I have that name right, but now my like.
I was gonna say, isn't Garyon Conley a corner?
As soon as I said it, I was like, that's got to be the whatever flu brain right now.
Garyon Christian.
Christian, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, Garyon Conley is definitely a corner.
Right. I knew it was Garyon. Garyon Christian played left tackle for them like a lot. I think you would say he was their primary left tackle last year because of injuries. And he's more of like a swing, I think ideally like a third tackle. But he's a free agent as well. So that's a player that maybe they could sign. I think Conklin's somebody that they could maybe call on and see if he's available in a trade, or maybe he becomes available as like a cap cut. But they have some options off of that Cleveland offensive roster. Obviously, we haven't even talked about Joe Flacco, who is also going to be a free agent.
Yeah.
But I'm not necessarily saying that we need to talk about that like we want to do it, but it is an option. So I think Onwenu's a fit. I think they would make it work with him. And one thing I will say that I also didn't mention earlier about the run scheme that's encouraging. You can see game to game how they like game plan different teams different ways. So they're not totally dead set in running the ball one specific way. Against the Jets, they did a lot of their old school stuff to get out on the perimeter and get away from Quinnen Williams and those types of guys. But then the next, week, or maybe it was a week before, against Houston in the regular season, they ran a very, very different run sort of install in that game. They were more downhill and trying to run more counter and trap schemes and things like that. So they have a lot of different things in their book. Very diverse run scheme, and I liked how they game planned and pieced it together down the stretch with Flacco. Look, if you get that kind of production out of Joe Flacco coming off his couch, you got to get some credit for that.
Right.
That was an impressive run that they had offensively.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Van Pelt deserves some of the credit for it, even though he wasn't calling the plays, because he was still the one putting that together, designing it. And any other thoughts on the offense before we move over? We'll touch on the other two sides of the ball quickly, and then we'll take some calls. Yeah,
I think that's the one other thing, and I know that people are gonna roll their eyes at me and get mad at me because there's so many like Arthur in New York or whatever. I think it's New York. He loves himself some Jaden Daniels, and I know I always get a lot of flack for this take, but the bottom line is that there's no better quarterback fit in this draft for this offense than Drake May. Like he's the best fit for this offense, but at the same time, this offense is at its best when you have a quarterback that can vertically throw the ball down the field. Like that's just the bottom line.
Well, I mean, May and Daniels can both do that.
Yeah, but when I look at it, like I think that one, there has to be an ability to go from under center. Like,
no, I agree with you that May is a better fit, but I don't think I think it would be incorrect to say Daniels is not a fit.
I don't know if he's not a fit. It's just not. It's not the best use of Jaden Daniels.
You could right. Like Jaden Daniels in theory should work in this offense, but not to the extent Drake May would.
I just feel like putting Jaden Daniels in this offense, and like to use a really good comp, I think Luke Getsy with Chicago and Justin Fields.
No, but the difference is Justin Fields was not a fit in that offense.
I think that it's similar. Like I think it's similar with Jaden Daniels, where I think that you're asking Justin Fields to be in an offense, and like this was what happened with Chicago for the first half of last year. Second half of last year, they start running option, they start running pistol, they start running spread, right? And they start to actually move the ball offensively in Chicago. I just look at Jaden Daniels, and I think out of the gate, he's going to have to be in an offense that is pretty option heavy and allows him to kind of develop as a passer as he kind of gets his feet wet in the NFL. A lot of the same thing, that the Ravens did with Lamar in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, remember Lamar's rookie year?
Well, he was running Joe Flacco's offense.
But he was like they were using him in like an option style offense right out of the gate under Greg Roman. And then as he kind of developed as a passer and as he got more comfortable as an NFL passer, they started adding more and more onto his plate as a thrower. Then obviously they bring in Todd Monken, and they do it right. They take it to a whole nother level. I think Jaden Daniels needs to be on a similar track. It's also the same way that the Eagles treated Jalen Hurts. He comes into the league, and a lot of what he's doing is RPO, read option, that sort of thing. And then as they look at him, they're like, oh, wow, he can actually do more as a thrower. He's getting more comfortable. We add more into like the traditional type of offense. I think Jaden Daniels is the same way. And I don't know if this offense is necessarily the greatest fit. And that's like what my one real knock on Van Pelt. Like the other stuff of it's not what everybody wanted and it's not, whatever. Like it doesn't necessarily matter at this point. But they moved on from him in Cleveland because they wanted to go in a different direction with Deshaun Watson. Like that's why he's not there anymore.
Right.
It's because they felt like this system wasn't a fit for Deshaun Watson, and it wasn't bringing out the best in Deshaun Watson. And I'm not saying that they're completely the same player or anything like that, but if you had to say who was Jaden Daniels more like, Joe Flacco or Baker Mayfield or Deshaun Watson, like we're all going to say Deshaun Watson, and I think that's a real, not a concern, but a real question for Alex Van Pelt. If you're Gerard Mayo and you're Elliot Wolf, is this, do you have to run the offense this way? Is this what and this is what you're comfortable with? Or is this just what you were doing because this is what Stefanski wanted you to do? Right. And
right.
That I think is a big question, because if this is my offense and we got to figure it out running it this way, then they have to get the right quarterback for that type of offense.
All right, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball here. DeMarcus Covington's the defensive coordinator. This one's kind of filled out. Jerry Montgomery's the defensive line coach. Mike Reese reported last night that Brian Belichick is back. He didn't confirm he's going to be the safeties coach, but I think we can imagine that would be the case. We're still waiting on linebackers, and we haven't heard anything one way or the other on Mike Pellegrino. So we don't know whether or not the cornerbacks coach is something the Patriots will be hiring. But, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about Covington as a potential DC even before he was hired. What's your initial read on Jerry Montgomery?
Well, it's kind of positive and negative. I think the positive is a lot of the Packers players have come out and said, you guys got a great one. I think it was like Kenny Clark went on Twitter and said, the Patriots got a great coach. And I think that the one thing that you look at in Green Bay too, they've done a really nice job of developing those interior guys like a Kenny Clark. They've done a nice job of pressuring the quarterback with their front. But now they have good players on their front. There's no doubt about that. But their defensive line has been a really good pressure defensive line. With that said, they've been terrible against the run for multiple years now in Green Bay. And I would say that they're undoing as a staff. And the reason why Joe Barry's not the defensive coordinator there anymore is because they can't stop the run. So when you have a defense that's 32nd against the run, and he's the defensive line coach, that for all the reasons why we gave DeMarcus Covington his flowers, right? For the Patriots run defense being good, we have to kind of be fair and play both sides of it. But I would say that that was more maybe schematic of like Joe Barry was a big too high believer, played a lot of Fangio style quarters and things like that. So they played a lot of light boxes. They played a lot of light defense. So I don't know if that was necessarily on the defensive line coach, that's just how they wanted to play defense.
Right.
Like that was their brand.
Which isn't going to be the case, I would imagine, under Covington.
No. But I'm not overly concerned about that because they do still have Covington and Mayo in the building, right. And they obviously have been scheming a great run defense for the last couple of years. So I like another kind of experienced guy, another guy that's been around and has shown his muscle a little bit there in developing players in Green Bay. They've gotten a decent amount out of that defensive line. So I'm encouraged by that one. And I think it's really nice that Brian will be back. I think that the one thing that was a little bit concerning about the defensive staff was that they weren't, they had DeMarcus Covington, they had Gerard Mayo, but they really had nobody that had secondary experience back yet in this system. Steve was obviously a secondary coach for a while. You don't know if Brian's coming back, and then you don't know if Pellegrino's coming back. Reese tweeted out a couple of days ago that projection. Remember, I think we talked about it briefly. And he had Brian on there, and then he confirmed last night that Brian's coming back. So something tells me that Mike is hearing whispers that Pellegrino might be coming back also. So I think that would be encouraging if both of those guys are back.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Pellegrino's done a great job. Patriots cornerbacks. Last year, they weren't great, but that was for reasons outside his control, outside of Mike Pellegrino's control. But you look at what they did, just churning some of these later round guys out or free agent pickups out. I mean, it's not the biggest example, but even a guy like Alex Austin last year, who they got after Thanksgiving, and he was making plays in December. Like, Mike Pellegrino does a good job, and I'd love to see him back. I think Jeremy Springer was hired last time we did the show.
Yes.
So I don't know if you have any more thoughts on him. He was the assistant for the worst-ranked special teams unit that really didn't allocate any resources towards special teams. Let's see what happens. I mean, I think we all assume Matthew Slater's going to retire, but let's see kind of how that unit shakes out personnel-wise. That's a pretty personnel-dependent role. I mean, they all are, but we'll see what happens there. I think you kind of wait and see with that one because he obviously wasn't in a great situation last year, and it didn't go well last year.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, front office, and then we'll go to the phones and your emails. We got a bunch of emails today, plus your calls, 855-PATS-500. But front office, we finally got the answer to the question yesterday. And Evan, excuse me, I want to start with this. I don't care. I do not care if the Patriots name a GM anymore. I couldn't care less if the Patriots give out that title. That's what I mean.
Give him the title.
I don't care.
On.
It's give him the title. Don't. It's academic. There's so many people yesterday were pissed. Like, oh, but they still don't have a GM. No, that's what that report was. I've talked about this, Evan. Final say. Roster control. That's what matters. Call him the GM. Call him the director of player personnel. Call him the Prince of New England. I don't care. Call him for breakfast. I don't care what you call him. They have the structure in place. That's what mattered. That's what was important. That's what we learned yesterday. That was not an incomplete report. The titles will come. It was reported yesterday by a couple of people, Andrew Callahan, Mark Daniels, that the titles are still being worked out. They all know what they're doing, regardless of what the title is. You know, call him lead mechanic. Matt Groh knows what he's doing. Elliot Wolf knows what he's doing. Cam Williams knows what he's doing. Pat Stewart knows what he's doing. They all know what they're doing. It's been organized. The titles will come. They probably won't get reported for a couple months after they're announced, so they will know them in the building before we do. I don't care whether we know the titles or not. The hierarchy's in place. It's Elliot Wolf's show. He has final say. Matt Groh's still going to run the scouting department, so ironically, their titles from last year basically flipped. When Groh was the director of player personnel and Wolf was the director of scouting. Those are still their listed titles. Those are basically holdovers from last year. Those are basically their 23 titles. So yeah, you flip those. Alonzo Highsmith, love the hire. First off, certified badass.
Yes.
Played at the U back when that meant something. Won a title. Was their leading rusher in the 80s. U in the 80s. Third overall pick, so a guy that knows a thing or two about the third overall pick, which the Patriots obviously will need to learn a lot about here in the next couple of months. A guy that's seen a lot of football in a lot of different places, in a lot of different settings, in a lot of different roles. Going to be a very valuable resource. My one question, and this is maybe more semantics than anything else after I just railed against the semantics of titles. I get the hypocrisy here. But that report yesterday from Rappaport, all right, so Groh's going to run the big picture. Wolf's going to run the big picture. Groh's going to run scouting. Highsmith, Pat Stewart are kind of their senior advisors all around. I think Pat Stewart probably is your assistant director of player personnel, VP of player personnel, something like that. Highsmith just got like a senior executive advisor title. Cameron Williams not included in that report, which stood out to me a little bit because he's somebody I know has been thought of highly in the building. Brings the angle of having been a Division I football player, obviously his previous ties to the organization through his dad, somebody who it felt like was building a lot of momentum in the organization, was at the Senior Bowl, so it's not like he's not a part of the front office anymore. Yeah. I just thought it was interesting he was absent in that. But overall, we got the answer. If the plan was to keep it in-house, I think this is the right structure to do that. And I guess that's my front office rant. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the first place to start for me is with Elliot Wolf. And you talk to people, and I was talking to people at the Senior Bowl. When you talk to people, this is a long time coming for Elliot Wolf to have a chance to run a team as the general manager, whatever title you want to use, but technically as the general manager. He spent 14 years in Green Bay with his father. Coming through the ranks there, paid his dues, started from the bottom, went all the way up to director of player personnel, director of football operations. In 2018, Ted Thompson retires, right? Right, he retires in Green Bay, and it was really between Elliot Wolf and Bryden Gutekunst to replace him, and the Packers ended up going with Goody, obviously, and Elliot Wolf goes to Cleveland under John Dorsey as the assistant general manager there for a couple of years, and then comes to New England and works up, the totem pole here in New England.
Right.
So we're talking about a guy, after I just laid all, forget about who his father is for a second, because, I think that holds some weight too when your father is a Hall of Fame executive too. But, forget about that for a second. I just described 20 years of NFL front office experience.
Yeah, he's a real GM resume.
100%. 100% real GM resume. And I think that that's what is important to remember, because I think a lot of people are saying, well, why didn't they go outside the building again? And it's this internal promotion, and it's just Ron Wolf's kid, and all this type of stuff. No, Elliot Wolf has paid his dues. Elliot Wolf has been around the block. Elliot Wolf has a great reputation around the league. I think he's going to do a really good job with this. And I think one of the big things,
do you think there's a chance if they didn't promote Elliot Wolf, somebody else might have hired him as an AGM or a GM?
I think it's definitely possible, and I think he would have been looking elsewhere. I know that he did look elsewhere. Was that 2 years ago that he interviewed for some positions outside the building, or maybe that was last year? The point is that he is more than qualified to run the Patriots, more than qualified. And I think the other thing that you look at is that over the last couple of years, they've put Macro a little bit more in the public eye as director of player personnel. He's done some press conferences. He's been around the media a little bit, and frankly, it's not becoming for him. He's just not very good at the public facing stuff. And when you're the top of the totem pole in the front office and you're the top executive in an organization, that sort of thing matters. And your station, Alex, how many times has your station played, if you want fast guys, draft fast guys, right? How many times have we played that? And I think that at this point, Elliot Wolf, I think, is a little bit more statesman-y. He's a little bit more of a guy that can handle himself in those public settings, and is a little bit more impressive in that manner. And so in a lot of ways, I look at this, and I think that this sort of hierarchy in the front office is really the way it should have been all along. But for most likely, because Bill just, that's just Bill's MO, Bill promoted Mac Rowe to director of player personnel because that was one of his guys, right? That he made in this league. But in reality, Elliot Wolf has been doing a lot of the quote unquote GM responsibilities behind the scenes, negotiating contracts and speaking to free agents and things like that. So now everybody gets to go back to their comfort zones. Everybody gets to do what they actually should be doing, which is Macro is essentially a college scout. And I think this is where your question about Cameron Williams does become interesting to me, because when I look at this, isn't Macro just basically a college scouting director?
He's director of amateur scouting.
It just doesn't really seem like he's, that's the title that Cameron Williams has currently, right?
Well, so or maybe Grove's the director of scouting. Maybe it's amateur and pro.
Sure. I look at the pro side of it, and I think that that's where Pat Stewart and Elliot Wolf have really made their hay in the league. And I think that Elliot Wolf is going to be running free agency. I think that he's going to have the biggest hand in that and identifying those players. So I think there's a couple of things that are, the bottom line is that, are they good at picking players or are they not? Right? That's what we're going to find out. That in whether or not that remains to be seen. But I just think that it's important to keep in mind that Elliot Wolf has definitely earned this opportunity and is somebody that a lot of people around the league are finally, someone has finally given him the keys, and that makes a lot of sense and things like that. So I'm encouraged by it. I think that it's also encouraging that he's really not of the Belichick school. like he's been with Belichick the last couple of years. But
that's not where he came up.
No, he was brought up as a Packers scout. You
right.
know, like he's a Packers guy. So I'm encouraged by it.
All right, we got a bunch of calls, a bunch of emails. Let's get through some of these. This is basically going to be the second half of the program today. So if you want to call in 855-PATS-500. We do have one open line. We'll open some more up as we take these calls. Starting with our friend Eldred in North Carolina. Eldred, good morning.
Good morning, fellas. How y'all doing?
Good.
Evan, I
What's
love
up,
you, man,
sir?
but I'm going to pick with you again. Okay,
Uh-oh.
I understand the schematic. You saying that Drake May fits whatever McAdoo or we got this coordinator. But my question is, what's making him a good fit? Because like you said, you got to work with him as a thrower. And like your buddy Barth said, the pure passer is, I'm still going to stick with Penix. And like I said, I think he's a better quarterback. And then Williams don't want to come to New England or Chicago. But he get drafted, probably won't get traded. But again, I'm going to ask you why you think May is a good fit when everybody in North Carolina is saying he can be another Wilson out.
All right, thanks for the call.
Throws not accurate. All right.
All right, thanks for the call, Eldred. I want to clarify something. When we were talking about, who's a better fit, I was just between May and Daniels in that question. Caleb Williams is going to the top of the draft. Michael Penix would also be a tremendous fit, I think, in Alex Van Pelt's offense.
I agree with that.
But if you want to clarify on Drake May.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest things with Drake May that are positives are his ability to throw in the middle of the field and his vertical throws, right? Like he's a very good vertical thrower, drop it in the bucket, drive the ball down the field, drive it up the seam, hit the post, those types of things. And that's what this offense is all about. This offense is let's play action, let's bootleg off of it. We got the big post down the field. If there's no safety up top, we're gonna throw it over the top and we're gonna try to hit the big play. That's Drake May right there. That's something that he can do. He's got the mobility to get outside the pocket. He can throw on the move on the bootlegs, like all that kind of stuff. I agree with you. I think Penix would be a decent fit in this offense as well. If I had to rank it of who were the best fits in this offense, I would say number one would be Drake May.
Yeah.
I might say Penix would be number two because of how good of a vertical thrower he is.
He's kind of day two Drake May in a way, isn't he? I mean, he doesn't have the mobility, but that's why he's day two. But, I mean, that's a lot of Washington's offense was play action deep shots because they had Dylan Johnson, who's a great running back. They'd run the ball with Dylan Johnson, suck the opposing defense up, and then hit it over the top. Now, it was more out of shotgun, and there wasn't as much of that bootleg stuff, but the core concepts, there's a lot of similar they got to the end goal the same way. They just approached it a little differently. They just kind of same picture, just a different frame on it. So and look, I don't know what the people down there in North Carolina are saying, Eldred, but I'm gonna trust myself on this. They all thought Sam Howell and Mitch Trubisky were going to be excellent. So maybe we flip it. Let's go to Nick in Omaha. Nick.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Okay, I got a question for Evan, and it's a bit of a nerdy Exos question, so I feel like you can have some fun here. Alex, you can feel free to chime in. It doesn't have to be just for Evan, but
okay.
So I played football like my whole life, and I've watched it my whole life, so I feel like I know a little bit about football. Like I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I play just probably too much Madden. I play like a ton of Madden, and it's not even for like the multiplayer. It's just purely for the franchise, setting contracts.
Sounding more like a me question than an Evan question.
Yeah.
I was starting this franchise, and you set up your scheme and everything, and I was going through the offense, and I feel like I know a lot about offensive schemes. You got West Coast, power, zone run, whatever. But when it came to defense, I feel like I was pretty ignorant on a lot of those titles. So I was curious, in your opinion, if it's like a base 4-3 or whatever, just in today's NFL, as it's mainly a passing league, is there a certain scheme that you feel is the best to kind of utilize your defense with? And then, I mean, the main reason why I'm bringing this to the show is because I'm curious how this relates to the Patriots, like what we've seen in the past and what we can see in the future with our defense. I will probably have a ton of follow-up questions, but I'll just take it off the air and listen in. But thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Nick. I'll tell you this, Evan. Madden still makes you run base 3-4 or 4-3 like way too much. Their playbooks have not caught up to the modern. So when you pick like 3-4, there's like you can do 4-3, 4-3 over, 4-3 disguise, 3-4 over, 3-4 disguise, things like that. You really have to pick because it's not so easy to be like, yeah, this is my pick, but I'm just going to go in nickel or I'm just going to go in dime the whole time. So however that frames your answer. I think he's asking what defense he should run in Madden.
Right.
I like 3-4 disguise personally. That's what I usually do.
That I can't answer for you because I don't know which one's the most effective. But honestly, I think of defensive schemes nowadays more from like the back to the front instead of the front to the back because everything is about stopping the pass, right? So there's 3 schools, but like there's really 2 main ones, and then one is just kind of like Mike McDonald and him being ridiculous, right? But the main schools right now are like the Belichick's disciple school of single high man coverage, that sort of thing. And then the other school is kind of the Fangio people, right? Who are running the palms and the quarters and the too high stuff. So I think a lot of the league is going more towards Fangio, and even the Patriots have run a little bit more too high coverage recently. But I think the one thing that is definitely key for a lot of these defenses is how do you then, take it and then marry the pass rush to that. And I think a lot of defenses nowadays are running a lot more exotic blitzes. And this is, I think, a lot of the main reason why defense has caught up to offense a little bit is because they have gotten to some more answers on the defensive side of the ball for how to generate pressure without sacrificing numbers in the back end. Because before it was like, all right, well, we can blitz 5 or 6 guys, but then we only have 5 or 6 guys in coverage to cover up everything. Right now, it's we're going to show blitz. We're only going to actually rush 4, but you still are going to have to treat it like a blitz. And then we still have our 7-man coverage structure. So I would say that, personally, I still think that the Belichick are now probably more the Mayo defense and the Covington defense that the Patriots are going to run next year. There's still definitely a place for that in the league. But if I had to say the prevalent scheme, like what's the Shanahan scheme, but on defense right now, it's definitely Fangio's defense.
And I think that makes it, I've said, well, maybe it's not so much Fangio, but the Seattle cover 3, right? That zone thing.
So Seattle started it, and then teams got so good at taking down Seattle's cover 3 that they had to, a lot of those Seattle 3 teams have sort of morphed to more quarters-based defenses and to kind of combat some of the things that they were seeing.
It's funny you compare it to Shanahan, though, because we've talked about this off the air before, that the Seattle 3 is to cornerbacks what the Shanahan offense is to quarterbacks. And not to take anything away from Sauce Gardner, but you look at what Sauce Gardner's asked to do, and of course he's dominant at it because he's an elite athlete and he's basically just asked to be an elite athlete. Yeah. And I think every system is meant to prioritize and emphasize. That's just how it works. Every system is meant to, all right, we're going to make it easier on this group, and the trade-off is it's going to be harder on this group, but we're going to build this group up more. Like we talked about how the old Patriots offense puts so much emphasis on the quarterback, and then you have the Shanahan offense that puts more emphasis on the receivers and the running backs to kind of be the playmakers. It's the same thing on defense as well, and it feels like who are you putting that emphasis on? Is it going to be on the pass rushers? Is it going to be on the corners? Is it going to be the linebackers? It's the same kind of thing. Personally, I still think if you can run man coverage, run it. I still think man coverage is the more effective coverage, but the reason everybody doesn't run it is it's harder. And you really need to have the right personnel where you can maybe get away with a little less if you're in zone because the scheme itself sort of elevates. But part of that is you have to have a really good pass rush. For years, the Patriots got by not necessarily having elite pass rushers because their corners were so good. Didn't matter if the quarterback had 5 seconds in the pocket because nobody was getting open for 5 seconds. And then in the last couple of years, they've kind of flipped where the corners haven't been as good, but you have Matt Judon, you have Josh Uche, you have Christian Barmore. So maybe the corners can only cover for 3 seconds, but that's fine because you're getting to the quarterback in 2.5. That's how I view defensive football. It's basically who are you putting the onus on in your system? who are you putting the onus on to elevate? Is it up front or is it on the back end? As long as you have one of the two, you'll be in okay shape. And, I mean, you have great defenses that can do both, where you can get to the quarterback in 2 seconds and have the thing covered for, 5-6 seconds down the field. But that's, one or two defense. We're talking about the Baltimore Ravens at this point. We're talking about having Justin Madubuike at one level and Kyle Hamilton at another with Patrick Queen in the middle.
Yeah, well, I'd be interested to see, especially if they win the Super Bowl on Sunday, Steve Spagnuolo and what he's done in Kansas City with that defense. It's an exotic scheme. They blitz like crazy. They spin the dial like crazy. They put a lot of stress on their DBs to tackle in space and play on islands and things like that. And that's why Trent McDuffie was a great pick for them, because that's what he does. He's a great tackler and great play speed and that type of stuff. Well, it'd be interesting to see if people try to emulate that a little bit more. I don't know if you can without Spags. Like, that's right. Sort of the difficult part there. Kind of like when I brought up Mike McDonald earlier with Baltimore. Well, now it's Seattle. So it'd be interesting to see how that sort of moves forward, because I do think that there is a lot of good things about the Fangio scheme. There's a lot of good things about Bill's scheme, obviously, but those things are starting to kind of pass by to some more blitz-heavy, more exotic type of defenses.
All right, let's go. So Eldridge spoke for the entire both states of the Carolinas and said, don't take Drake May. Anthony is in South Carolina. Does he have a rebuttal, or does he agree? Anthony.
Hey, good morning, fellas. How you doing?
Morning.
Good.
I just had a quick question. Is the comparison between Drake May and Jaden Daniels like a big difference between their passing ability? I don't know if I believe I saw it correctly that Jaden Daniels had a better passing year than Joe Burrow. And also,
yeah, go ahead.
Do you guys think that we should go to a player more like Jaden Daniels if our offensive line isn't, I say, great, that he can like move and take off? Because he looks pretty fast on tape.
Yeah, he's definitely fast, Anthony. Thanks for calling. He should, if he runs the combine, he's going to run in the 4.4s. As for I don't think Daniels had a better year than Burrow. I mean, that's him and Cam Newton in 2011 are like the two greatest quarterback seasons since the turn of the century. As for the comparison between him and May, I think Daniels is more of an outside the numbers thrower, whereas May's more, Evan, as you've talked about, middle of the field guy. I think that's probably They both have big arms, and they both can throw on the run. I think the chief difference is where they're throwing to.
Yeah, I just look at Jaden Daniels, and it's nothing to do with like his passing ability. Like, I don't want to get caught up in all that. But it just, when I look at Jaden Daniels, I look at somebody that ideally, it's a lot like going back, and we used the Deshaun Watson, kind of conversation earlier when we were talking about Alex Van Pelt. When Deshaun Watson was in Houston with Bill O'Brien, they basically took the Patriots 2011 offense and said, we're just going to put Deshaun Watson in the gun, in the spread, and he's just going to make something happen. Like, if there's something in structure there, then he's going to take it, make quick decision with the football. If it's not, then he's going to run around and make a play. And if I'm Jaden Daniels, I think that's where I would much rather build the offense with him. I like I said earlier, with guys like Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, I would start with the option stuff as well. Like, I think it's important to get him into that sort of offense right out of the gate too. But he's built to be in a spread offense. Like, he should be in the gun, spread field, option style. Let's just pick him apart that way. Whereas I think Drake May is a little bit more of that like traditional pocket passer, where he's somebody that is going to run play action from under center. He's somebody that is going to be able to read the middle of the field and pick apart the middle of the field. He's somebody that's going to be able to maybe early on have a better feel for like timing and anticipation and reads in the middle of the field. I think that's the one thing when you watch Jaden Daniels on film, who I love, by the way. Like, I feel like I am, like, people always think I'm like trashing him. When you watch him on film, though, he passes up a lot of open throws between the numbers, like crossing routes, in cuts, things like that. and he doesn't always have the best timing in between the numbers. So I just look at him as somebody that I want to be in that spread formation, to be in the gun, and just let him cook, right? Whereas with Drake May, I think that he's a little bit more of that like traditional NFL passer. There's nothing wrong with being Jaden Daniels. It's just if I'm an OC, I'm making sure that I'm putting him in a position to succeed. And I don't necessarily think that that is by making him run like 7-step drop, play action, bootleg nonsense. Like I don't think that that's going to help him out.
Let me ask you this. Who's a better fit in Cliff Kingsbury's offense?
Oh, Jaden Daniels, 100%.
Okay. So the reason I ask that, and I'm sure a lot of people can tell where I'm going. So let's say Caleb Williams goes 1-1.
Yeah. It sounds like he's going to, according to Schefter.
A lot of people wrote off Drake May to the Patriots when they got the 3rd pick.
Yeah.
Does Cliff go to Scott Peters? Does Cliff go to Adam Peters and say, hey, Jaden Daniels is my guy? And then basically deliver the Patriots Drake May at 3? Like, I think that's on the table.
I've thought about. It's something I've thought about.
Or the other thing, does he go there and say, you need to trade up for Caleb Williams? The Bears decide to take the haul, build around Justin Fields. They take Marvin Harrison at 2. One way or the other, I think Cliff Kingsbury, there's a good chance he delivers the Patriots Drake May. Him going to Washington delivers the Patriots Drake May. I think there's a real shot at that.
Yeah, and I know that, look, we've gone back and forth at times about Kyler and if we think Kyler's good or not and whatever. But bottom line is when Kyler was healthy in Arizona, Cliff was getting a lot out of Kyler.
All right, but the difference,
a passer and a runner, and I look at the way that they ran the offense in Arizona, which was basically just an adapted air raid, with the option runs and things like that sprinkled in there as well. Like that Jaden Daniels would thrive in that offense. He'd go crazy in that offense.
Yeah, I mean it's basically what he's running at LSU.
Right. I mean that's why I've always liked Cliff, is because I think that his offense, and this is a lot of people have said, oh, Cliff Kingsbury keeps failing up and like like he's not actually successful and gets these jobs. I think the reason why he gets these jobs is because his offense fits the modern style of quarterback. Like when you get a guy like a Caleb Williams, like a Jaden Daniels, like when you get your hands on a guy like that as an organization, Cliff Kingsbury's offense, he's running a college-style offense in the NFL. Right. That is going to bring out the best in those types of guys. So, yeah, I would definitely – I don't really see the fit too much with Drake May, honestly, with Cliff. That's not saying that Drake May would be terrible because he's I think, he's got a chance to be good regardless. But I just think that Jaden Daniels is definitely the answer.
All right, let's go to Ryan in OKC. Ryan, how you doing?
Hey, good morning, fellas.
Hey.
Hey, so I had 2 thoughts and a question for you. First of all, I haven't been able to call in for a couple weeks. Evan, I really liked your article you had with all the former linebackers detailing the Gerard Mayo hiring.
Thank you.
I had a chance to meet with Brandon Spikes at UF just a couple months ago, and that guy makes you want to eat a bowl of nails for breakfast. He's sick. There's some really 100%. Cool Gronk clips with him talking about, the hardest he'd ever been hit in his career was from Brandon Spikes in practice. That dude's legit. So I appreciated that write-up.
Thank you.
So with the news on the Elliot Wolf, taking the reins on that, I've been thinking a lot about that article, or I guess the tweet that it came out about if Elliot Wolf takes over, they're going to give a serious look to Joe Alt at number 3. So I've been digging a little bit into those Packers drafts while he was in their system, and man, they really attacked O-line and D-line in the first round. But just as much as they did that, they always nailed receivers in the 2nd and 3rd round. I mean, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Monte Adams were all drafted while Elliot Wolf was in that front office. Not saying that those are his picks, but that kind of feels like the model that he's been thrown in, and maybe what he tries to do here. And then my last question, and I'll take it off the air, is obviously there's the big 3 needs: quarterback, wide receiver, and tackle. I'm curious what you guys think the approach will be in some of those tertiary needs, specifically free safety and running back depth.
All right, thanks for the call, Ryan. On the second point, it's a great point. That's how those Packers teams built. Now, they never needed a quarterback when Elliot Wolf was there. So that reshapes the discussion. Would he go quarterback at the top of the board? But this was the whole reason Aaron Rodgers left. They wouldn't draft him a receiver in the first round. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
They just wouldn't do it. And Evan,
second round isn't good enough. It has to be first.
Right. You know I've been red in the face about this. Marvin Harrison is not the only receiver in the draft, believe it or not. He's not the only good receiver in the draft, despite what some people may think.
Yeah.
This is such a good wide receiver draft, and people are petrified of Tyquan Thornton, and I get it. The answer to missing on a second-round receiver is not to stop drafting second-round receivers. It's to change your approach, recognize what you did wrong, and go back at it, and you now have a front office and a staff that has identified wide receiver talent in the second round at a high level. It doesn't mean you can close your eyes and throw a dart and hit a Pro Bowler. But I trust them to find a guy on day 2. I trust the new regime to find a wide receiver on day 2, which opens you up on day 1 to the quarterback or the tackle. The report that they were going to seriously consider Joe Alt at 3 with Elliot Wolf, I mean, they should seriously be considering everybody. I didn't read a ton into that. I think that's just draft semantics. His question, or if you have any thoughts on that, and then we can get to his question.
Yeah, I would agree with that point that you just made about that report. And I'm not trying to pick on the report. I just, at this point in the game, everybody's on the board.
Right. It's just how draft season works.
It's very early. We haven't even hit the combine yet. We haven't hit pro days. We haven't had 30 visits. Like, we're very, very early on in the process. And tackle is a big, big need for this team. We all know that. And so, yeah, Joe Alt is definitely on the table at number 3, as he should be. He's one of the best players on the board. So I don't necessarily look too much into that either. In terms of their draft history in Green Bay, I think you make a good point that they never really needed the number 1 quarterback, right? Like they had Aaron Rodgers, so they didn't have to draft the guy.
And he wasn't there when they took. He was already gone by the time they took Love. Wolf was.
Yeah, but his father, Ron Wolf, one of his big tenets, one of his huge philosophies as a team builder is that you should always be taking quarterbacks.
Right.
I think Ron Wolf was quarterback every single year. I think was his whole thing. Like, even if it was like a 7th round pick, just you should always be adding quarterbacks to your room. And so I think that they would definitely still see the value in quarterback, but I know that people are going to hate it. And, I go back and forth with people about this on the show, on Twitter, all the time about tackle. But the bottom line is that there's different ways to build a team. And the Detroit Lions, I think, are a great example of a team, and their GM just went out in the media. Did you see that, Alex? And was trashing the media because back in 2021, everybody in Detroit wanted the Lions to draft Justin Fields.
Right.
Everybody wanted them to draft Justin Fields. They end up making the trade for Jared Goff, and they draft Penny Sewell, 7th overall.
Good for him.
In the draft in 2021. Do you think the Lions are crying that they didn't draft Justin Fields?
No.
It's definitely a path. Am I saying it is the path that I would pick? Not necessarily. But if they said to us that, that we need to get better in the trenches, that, until we're better up front, the quarterback is going to struggle, that sort of thing, there's definitely sound logic to that.
All right, let's go. We got a bunch of emails. Let's run through some of these. Sam from St. Catharines. I want to see us trade up for Caleb Williams. If you have the opportunity to get the best quarterback, you do it every time. Fastest way to rebuild is to hit on the quarterback, and he's by far the best one in recent years. I don't care if we have to trade number 3 and next year's first to go get him. Next year's first-round pick or whatever, it doesn't matter in the grand scale of things if we have Caleb Williams for the next 15 years. It all sounds well and good. If it's this year's first and next year's first, I do it. That's not even going to come close to what it's going to take to get up there, if the Bears are even willing to trade it. Like you're talking about, they do not. In theory, he's right. If you get Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams is a better player than Bryce Young, which kind of, I know people are going to have an issue with what I'm about to say, but you need to be able to – the quarterback's only part of it. You still need to be able to add around the quarterback. And the Patriots don't exactly have the roster where they can just bump up, add the quarterback, and be good. They still need future assets. Caleb Williams is a great prospect. I don't think Drake May and Jaden Daniels are bad prospects, though. So it's going to be, again, if it's just this year's first, next year's first, fine. You're probably talking about this year's first, this year's second, next year's first, next year's second, and a player. And that probably just gets you started.
Yeah, the conversation I think that we should be having around Chicago, and again, not necessarily the path that I would take, but something that is on the table is, would you trade for Justin Fields?
No.
You know, like I don't think that trading up to number 1 overall is a great way to go. I know I agree with you that Caleb Williams is a better prospect than Bryce Young was, but that is the worst case scenario, is to be the Carolina Panthers, where you have a quarterback that isn't good enough to elevate it all on his own, probably shouldn't need to anyways, like that's not fair to ask of him anyways. And now Bryce Young is going into year 2, and they don't have a first-round pick to upgrade the roster for him. Like they're just in a tough spot in Carolina, and I would hate to see the Patriots end up there.
Phil in North Carolina said, he's a question for both of us. So his question for you: if Drake May's superpower and carrying trait is his ability to read and hit the middle of the field, are we then worried about how that carries over to the NFL, given the overall competition in the ACC? This, to me, is the biggest question with Drake May. He really didn't play anybody good in college. And you can just watch some of the tape and see how the physical tools translate. But, Evan, are you worried about the jump in competition, especially when it comes to the middle of the field?
No, not necessarily. Like I understand the knock. I think that his physical traits are there enough for me to not like. You can just use the eye test kind of seeing the arm strength and the mobility and the size and that sort of stuff. I think that my biggest concerns with Drake May are more mechanical. You know, like his lower half is never consistent. They're going to have to work with, if it's him, that's going to be the thing that they're going to have to drill the most. Yep. Footwork, lower body mechanics. But that's why you hired Alex Van Pelt. Like that's why you hired
big footwork guy, by the way, specifically Van Pelt. Big footwork guy. Yeah,
like those guys that he is known for footwork and all that kind of stuff, being a bit very, very good at helping quarterbacks with that. That's Drake May's biggest knock right now, is his mechanics and his just pocket mechanics and his lower body. If that doesn't get fixed, then he's going to spray the ball in the NFL, just like he did in college this past year.
All right, and his question for me, we kind of just answered this. Assuming Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. are the first 2 picks, what's more interesting or intriguing for the Patriots, taking a quarterback or trading down for wide receiver or tackle? You take the quarterback. You take Drake May there, 100. You sprint that card up.
I think that I would still take either Drake May or Jaden Daniels over the alternative. Like, yes. And as much as I would have concerns about Jaden Daniels in this exact offense, you go to Alex Van Pelt, you go to Ben McAdoo, you go to that staff, and you say, hey, you got this guy that's just got oodles of talent in Jaden Daniels. Figure it out, right? Like, just figure it out. I think that's still where you got to go.
Let's see here. Somebody asking about trading down, talking about packages that have gone for the 3rd pick in recent years. Talks about like the Trey Lance trade, 3 for 12 plus multiple 1st and 3rds future years. Wants to see the Patriots try to build that way, adding a bunch of picks. Mentions getting C.J. Stroud. I don't, where the organization's at right now, I don't think they're going to have the patience to do that. That's just the reality of it. Then rank these 4 options as bridge quarterbacks for next season. I assume this is if the Patriots don't draft a quarterback. Jameis Winston, Gardner Minshew, Drew Lock, Jacoby Brissett. And this is Jeff and Needham. He says, if you don't have Jacoby Brissett last, I disagree. Brissett is guaranteed under 500. At least the other guys have upside. Well, if you're not taking a quarterback, you're probably not a playoff team. Why are you trying to get to the middle? In terms of ranking them as quarterbacks, I go Jameis, Gardner. This is tough, actually. Jameis is definitely number 1. I feel like Jacoby, Gardner, Minshew, Drew Lock are all kind of the same tier. I don't know.
I kind of
really
like Gardner Minshew out of that group personally.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. He got the Colts competitive this year. You know, like that team was still relevant even though
Drew Lock won a couple games for the Seahawks.
Yeah, no.
You hate Drew Lock.
Gardner Minshew won some like real games like for the Colts.
Oh, he beat the Patriots in Germany.
And I like Jacoby Brissett as not necessarily. These are not bridge quarterbacks to me, by the way. Like these are backup quarterbacks that might be starting 7-8 games just to get to your rookie.
Well, but Jeff's talking about not drafting a quarterback, or at least not drafting high. So
right, but when I think of that though, and I think of like that true bridge quarterback, and I'm not saying that they should do this, but like Russell Wilson would be a bridge quarterback. Like you try Russell Wilson for a year or two, see if it works out, and then you go back into the draft. I would just say that Jacoby Brissett's calling card and like what makes him an intriguing candidate to be signed as a veteran backup is that he's just a really good freaking dude, right? Yeah. So like you bring him in, he mentors the guy, he starts some games for you in the beginning of the year if you need him to, and then it's a mini bridge. It's not like a bridge. But what was it? There's another part of somebody's question that I can't remember now. All right, never mind.
All right, well, this one I think is directed at you. This is from Christian. I'm going to just read this word for word. I'm going to try to capture Christian's tone here because I think it's good.
Okay.
Why in the hell is Drake May a better fit? Every snap Drake May has taken has been in shotgun, just like the rest of them. If you want the best deep ball rollers or boot throwers, it's Daniels and Caleb. May throws the ball inaccurately when he rolls out and doesn't set his feet. Even, I assume that's supposed to say Evan, even has flu brain for sure. There's a second part to this as well. He sent another email. So that last one was at 10:39. This is at 10:55. All caps. Do not take May. We watch him every week, and he's nothing special, dude. And please fix your hat.
I didn't even know you could see me, to be fair, with the hat.
Oh, yeah, no, you've been up the whole time. I'm glad you broke the seal on us wearing hats on the show. I've always wanted to do that.
I didn't know that you could see me. But second of all, I just every single time I bring up Drake May in a conversation for the Patriots, this is where it goes. People just get like furious. I don't understand.
Oh, Chris, there's a third email here from Chris. He's from North Carolina, so he's echoing what Eldridge said.
Okay, cool. So you like grew up in North Carolina or something, so now you know everything about Drake May. Sorry, like no one else can watch him and have an opinion.
You want the third email?
I'm only gonna look at Boston College quarterbacks from now.
Well, don't make the same mistake I did with Phil Dracovic. Here's the first email from Christian. This was at 10 o'clock. This was right when the show started. Hello, guys. I need help. I seriously can't not see what everyone else does with Drake May. I've watched film on all the QBs, including every game they played last year as well.
Yeah, you watched the film.
I just don't see it. I just feel like everyone heard the big name. People say he's number 2 QB and accepted it. Some people explain to me what they see because I see Daniels as being a way better prospect. Thank you. For the record, I actually think Daniels is the second best quarterback in this class, but I don't think it's that close. Or I do think it's very close. Sorry, I do think it's very close between the two. But anyway, your response, Evan. Why in the hell is Drake May a better fit? Is the lead here?
I keep on telling you. I keep on telling everybody why he's a better fit.
Well, I guess people tell Christian, and he doesn't see it. So.
Well, he's from North Carolina, so he'd know better than me.
Oh boy, here we go. This is from Chad. This is specifically to us. So, I'm doing my due diligence on QBs in this year's draft. Who do you think, based on that intro, Evan, this is going to be about?
I'm
doing my due diligence on QBs in this year's draft, and I'm currently on J.J. McCarthy. Now, I'm not saying he should be a top 5 prospect with the likes of Williams, May, and Daniels, but he could be a fringe day 2 candidate and potentially sit behind a vet until he's ready. That's not what I truly want, but JJ's made some really good throws throughout his career. Chad in Atlanta. Honestly, I didn't like where that was starting. I agree with, minus the last part about he's, made some good throws throughout his career. Yeah, that's what he is. He's like a fringe day 2 pick. He's like a back end of the top 100 pick that you have a Jordan Love type plan for, that you're going to sit for a year or two behind an established starter, no chance he needs to play, and develop him. And that's not what I want to see the Patriots do. J.J. McCarthy is a perfect fit for the Patriots if it's 2018 and they still have Tom Brady for 2 more years. J.J. McCarthy's the exact kind of guy they draft in that situation. When you don't have a clear starting quarterback, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, look, the bottom line with J.J. McCarthy is, Alex, is that both you and I are going to be wrong, right? Like, I put it wrong in air quotes because I think we probably will end up being right in the long run. But J.J. McCarthy is going to go in the first round. Like,
yeah, I've said that. I never underestimate how dumb these teams can be. Sorry, go ahead.
And the league likes him better than everybody, than the media does. Everybody loves that report, right?
Right.
JJ McCarthy, league's higher on him than draft media, league's higher on him than Twitter or whatever.
That was Zach Wilson, man. That's my comp, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, cool.
And I did not.
Michael Penix will go in the third round, and
he's
JJ
going
McCarthy
third
will go
round.
In the first round. JJ McCarthy will go in the first round, and Penix will be the better player in the NFL. Like that, that's on them.
Zach Wilson, man. I'm sticking by that comp. Zach Wilson to a T. And remember, Zach Wilson was my QB6 in that draft. I had him behind Kyle Trask, who didn't pan out. But it's fine. They got Tom Brady and everything changed. Or I guess they already had Tom Brady. But this is from Guillermo. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Guillermo. Hey, guys, this is a really good email. This is a really good point. Hey, guys, I was thinking about trade targets. Don't you think maybe Kyle Pitts should be one that would fit the new offense? Haven't heard anything of him being on the trade block, but just an idea since the Falcons are changing their coaching staff. I don't know what it would take to get Kyle Pitts because there hasn't been that much talk about it, but we talked before about finding your David Njoku. Kyle Pitts is a better version of that player, despite what Arthur Smith would have you believe. The one trade down idea I entertain is 3 for 8 next year's first and Kyle Pitts. If they're going to trade down, that's what I would do. Now, there may be other ways to get Kyle Pitts. If it's Kyle Pitts for like a third, absolutely. Absolutely, I would do that. Kyle Pitts in this offense, I think would be a tremendous fit, Evan. I don't know if you agree, but if you can't tell, I'm still high on Kyle Pitts despite the Falcons' best efforts.
Kyle, I think the biggest thing with Kyle Pitts is you need to look at it and realize, like, is this just a player that hasn't been used correctly, or does he just not have a position in the NFL?
I think
it's and I would probably agree with you, but that's definitely a question that when you watch his film in Atlanta and you kind of diagnose the situation, is he just one of those guys that's kind of like a tweener and you just don't really know where to put him, and that kind of makes it difficult, or is he somebody that's just being underutilized and used incorrectly? But it was the trade down scenarios earlier. Remember, I said that something was jogging my mind. So the Patriots are at 3, right?
Yeah.
Arizona's at 4, and the Chargers are at 5.
Yeah.
How much Danny Ainge does Elliot Wolf have in him?
Oh no, this is different. It's not the NBA draft. I wouldn't risk it.
Because those two teams are not going to take quarterbacks.
Right, but especially the Chargers. Could the Chargers move back for a team that wants to take a quarterback?
I'm just
and then you get jumped.
Okay, I agree with you that it's probably too risky.
Evan, so what you're saying is basically trade down and take a quarterback. That's what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that
you're saying trade down, take a quarterback.
There's a chance that you could probably get, and it's probably a quarterback, but I'm just saying there's a chance that you could get the same player at 6 that you want at 3, because those two teams are going to take non-quarterbacks.
All right, hang on.
That's what I'm saying.
Put this tablet down to find my list here. Do you know the last time a team traded down in the top 5?
I know. You did your research, but I'm just telling you that is that not possible?
This is you are talking about something, Evan, that hasn't been attempted in 30 years. And all it takes is the Falcons or the Raiders or whoever trading up to 5, and your entire offseason plan is shot. The last quarterback that was traded down for, period, forget range. No team has traded down and taken a quarterback in the first round since 2013. That was E.J. Manuel. The Bills went from 8 to 16 and took him. He was the only first-round quarterback that year. The only other times it's happened, really, in our lifetime. So that was 2013. The last one before that, 2003, when the Bears moved back and took Rex Grossman. But they got 2 firsts. They moved back from 4. They got 13 and 22, and they took Grossman at 22. Meanwhile, they missed on Byron Leftwich, the only quarterback they missed on. 2002.
Right, there's a first time for everything, though, right?
2002, Washington moved back from 21 to 32 to take Patrick Ramsey. 1999, somebody, I think it's the Bears, moved back from 7 to 12 to take Cade McNown. Missed on Dante Culpepper, by the way. The last time it happened in the top 5, Kerry Collins. The Panthers went from 1 to 5 to take Kerry Collins. The then Houston Oilers took Steve McNair, 3rd overall. You believe in the quarterback, you take him. It's different than other positions. You believe in the quarterback, you take him. It's a nice idea. Danny Ainge, Jason Tatum, all that. Doesn't work in this league. Doesn't work with that position.
Okay. I'm just saying that I would stay at 3 and take the quarterback. I would. But
I get it. You're bringing it up.
And the trade down scenarios, like, realistically, if we just say that they don't like the quarterbacks or they don't like the quarterback that's left, then the trade down scenarios are very intriguing. I know it's what nobody wants to hear, but they could really set themselves up with a war chest if they were to do that.
So I think a trade down makes sense. For me, the way I look at the board and it's how I look at it, like they need to add more picks. They need to add more top 50 picks. I look at trading down from 34 because I think like 40 to 70 is a real strong point in this draft. So I think you move down from 34, maybe pick up, an extra second this year or an extra second next year. Like, I like the idea of trading down to add assets. I just do it in the second round instead of the first round. Nicholas asked about if the Commanders may go with Jaden Daniels over Drake May. We talked about that. We both think yes. The subject of this one just says Last Chance U, so I'm very excited because if you haven't watched Last Chance U on Netflix, definitely check it out. Awesome, awesome football documentary. It's a series. They follow a JUCO team every year. And actually, the guy who produced it is going to be doing the Red Sox Netflix series that's coming out. So definitely recommend Last Chance U. So Craig says, Pats fan from the UK since 2006. New listener since the international game. We love that. Seen one series of Last Chance U with Dior Scott. Remember Dior Scott, who went to Hawaii? It's about Patriots signing him. That was a while ago. My question is, do Last Chance U players last in the NFL due to limited knowledge of the college system? There's a couple Last Chance U guys hanging around. I think that documentary ultimately hurt a lot of guys because they didn't always paint players in the best light. There's been a couple guys. What's his name? The running back, Rakim Sanders from Arkansas. He was in that. He hung around the league a little bit. Pats have had a couple guys in camp. I'm trying to remember who it is. There's one Last Chance U player who's in the league who's really good, but he was never. They would only feature like 7 or 8 players, and he wasn't one of the featured players. He was on the team, and like you saw him in the background, but I don't think they ever interviewed him. But I can't remember who that was. Anyway, I appreciate the question and a chance to talk about Last Chance U. I got a couple more here. David, Boston Dave says, I heard you say Drake May is perfect for the offense. Not perfect, just the best fit. I heard you say Drake May is perfect for the offense. Is Penix or Fields a fit for the offense AVP is going to run? We talked about this. I think Penix is a really good fit as well. Justin Fields, no, because they struggle to add that quarterback run element with Deshaun Watson, and you're going to need the quarterback run element to make it work with Justin Fields.
Yeah. I just think it's hilarious. I think nothing gets people more riled up than me saying that Drake May is a good fit for this offense and Jaden Daniels is not as good of a fit. Look, Jaden Daniels is he deserves a lot of credit. Like he's got like a whole marketing team for himself down in North Carolina, which is people that just hate Drake May. So like that, he's in good hands. Like
if only he could be drafted by the Panthers.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Like it's incredible.
All right. Claire checking in. Claire from the UK. Right now, and I reserve the right to change my mind, I may all the way. I would like to see a big, tough, broad-shouldered quarterback who can take hits and stuff, not a little guy who can run around and not read the field as much. I don't know who that's about.
She just wanted to get the broad-shouldered thing in there.
She also said she's met on Kyle Pitts, which I'm surprised of from Claire. I would think that's kind of tight end that she'd be interested in. Ryan says, been watching your mock drafts for years. Always love hearing the players you like. It's fun to think this might be the first year they actually pick some of them. No,
that's rude.
We had Marcus Jones. We nailed that one. We had them taking Cole Strange one year. It wasn't in the first round, but we had them taking Cole Strange. We've hit on a couple.
I
don't know if that was supposed to be a shot at us or not, but
we didn't. I think both of us loved Christian Gonzalez. We just didn't think
he'd be on the board, right?
We had to respect the board, and it turns out that we didn't.
Now that I think about it,
too much.
I don't know if this is a shot at us or a shot at the previous draft, saying like, the guys you like, now they'll take them because they'll take good players.
Previous drafts, I think.
I feel more interested than ever in draft talk. It's been hard to get excited for drafts when they chose day 3 guys on day 1 or day 2. Love getting excited about draft talk. Let's see what else. This one's to me. Alex, I like your direction. Love where this is starting. I want to.
And Evan's an idiot.
I want to pitch this and get your thoughts. Trade down to Falcons at 8. Get Pitts in next year's first for 3. Then get Penix in the second round. And get Gardner Minshew in free agency. I mean, I still want to take the quarterback at 3. But like I said, this is the one trade down I'll entertain. Let's say at 8, you either get Joe Alt or Malik Neighbors at 8.
Yeah.
And then you have Penix, and you have the Falcons first next year. Wouldn't be my least favorite thing. I don't know that would be an A for me, but I would give it a passing grade for sure. I don't know about you, Evan.
Yeah, I think that, like I said earlier, the trade down scenarios, if you're not falling in love with one of these quarterbacks that's going to be available to you, then those are all viable scenarios. Like I think that's probably what I would do. If you're not going to take a quarterback at 3 and you're because you're not sold on one of these quarterbacks, then I'd be trading down and trying to accumulate assets, because you're still probably going to get, like, once we get past the quarterbacks and Marvin Harrison Jr., let's face it, like Joe Alt, Olo Fashanu, Malik Neighbors, like these are all kind of the same level of prospect at that point.
Yeah. This is why, like, people are just sending emails in because they know we normally don't like read through emails like this. So I apologize, Evan, for hijacking your show. But literally, as I'm reading them, more people are sending them in. Rob in the Catskills, any thoughts on Jordan Travis in later rounds? Like later, so Jordan Travis is quarterback at Florida State.
Is he even going to play next year?
So I guess down at he went to the Shrine Bowl to do interviews, and I guess he was telling people he thinks he'll be cleared by October.
Oh,
so look, if it's the 6th round, he shouldn't be your only quarterback pick. If you're telling me it's the 6th round, they feel like they've had a very complete draft, you want to bring him in. Yeah, I mean, he showed some interesting stuff at Florida State. He is really small.
Yeah. And
that worries me, especially for a guy that's had this kind of injury. If you want to take him late on day 3 as a second quarterback, knowing you're probably going to keep him on NFI all year, sure. I mean, he's worth a 6th-round flyer. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I don't know about making him your quarterback pick. I wouldn't make him your plan. I would say if you come out of the offseason, he's the only quarterback you've added, you still don't have any true direction at quarterback.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right, last one. Here we go. Catch-22. Patriots position philosophy. We love philosophy questions. And then we actually got a call, too. So appreciate you guys carrying the show.
It's somebody from North Carolina.
Philadelphia. Hello. Thinking about last year's rookies after Gerard Mayo's hiring, I've been wondering if the team's view on player positions will change. Most notably, I'm wondering if Belichick or Mayo viewed Marte Mapu as a safety rather than a linebacker. Did Mayo make the decision to play Mack Wilson on the edge rather than as an inside linebacker? Would someone like James Williams out of Miami, and we got to pay attention to the Miami guys now because Alonzo Highsmith's in the front office, is working with the U last year. Does somebody like James Williams out of Miami be a linebacker or a safety in Gerard's eyes, et cetera, et cetera? I genuinely hope Mayo sets guys up for success and plays them at their best positions. Love the show. I appreciate you guys sharing knowledge with us. Best, Carlos. So, great question. Great question. Let's start with Mapu. Because after the draft, we came in here, Evan, you were so encouraged that he was going to be a linebacker and they were going to modernize your defense, and you kept rolling your eyes at me when I said they drafted him to be a big safety, and then he became a big safety. Does that maybe change this year? Because to another part of the email, was it Mayo or Steve Belichick towards the end of the year talked about, we were playing Mack Wilson incorrectly his first year. One of them said that.
Yeah. I remember that quote.
Is there a recognition, and do you think they used Marte Mapu correctly this year and the few chances he did play on offense, and do you think maybe he gets to play a more true linebacker role next year?
I guess it depends on if Kyle Duggar's here or not. Like, if Kyle Duggar's here, and they're able to be more flexible with Marty Mapu, then I could see that. If Kyle Duggar's not here, then I think that he's Kyle Duggar's replacement. Like I've kind of sort of succumbed to that.
Isn't Jabril Peppers Kyle Duggar's replacement though?
Well, Jabril Peppers isn't gonna like man up tight ends and things
That's
like
true.
that.
Okay.
You know, I don't know. I'm not for. I think in a lot of ways for the better. Like I'm not necessarily saying this is like a super negative thing.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that they're gonna philosophically change all that much on defense. Like I think that they're gonna sort of look at positions and look at body types and look at roles and stuff like that pretty similarly.
I don't think it's a philosophical change. I guess it's more. It's a good point in the email, the way it's phrased with Mac Wilson. It wasn't a philosophy change with Mac Wilson. They realized the guy was better used doing something else.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a chance that something similar happens with Marte Mapu, I guess is the point?
I think that yes, but I think that they might look at it and say, well, we're going to use him in the Kyle Duggar role, not Kyle Duggar's role last year, but like Kyle Duggar's role when Devin McCourty was still here. And he's going to be closer to the line of scrimmage and playing at the first and second level. And like that, it all is kind of the same at that point.
I got you.
But
call him what you want kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, we'll see. But you mentioned Alonzo Highsmith. I know we talked about him earlier, but one of the things that I think is encouraging about him too is that, he's really good at like being like a liaison between the players, the coaching staff and the front office with the players. And is somebody that like is almost like a sounding board for the players to like kind of come to him and come with, concerns or whatever. And I think that that's like a really important role because it kind of separates Elliot Wolf from like the players a little bit.
Right.
And kind of serves as like a buffer between those. So I'm actually very encouraged about him being on the staff. I think that's a really good hire.
And I mean, you get a former player in that front office where Cameron Williams played in college, but former NFL, high profile NFL player. I think you don't need your entire front office to be former players. You don't need your entire coaching staff to be former players, but you shouldn't be entirely devoid of them either. I truly believe that. So I think Highsmith adds that important element. Let's go to William in Philadelphia on the phones. William, on a very interactive Catch-22.
What's going on, Alex?
Hey.
How you doing?
Good.
What's going on to you too, Evan?
How you doing?
All right now. So I just want to say this one first. Well, so much pushback on Drake May. Man, that's wow. I ain't knew Patriots fans was out on him like that. I like Drake May. Maybe he can do those passes. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't asked. Maybe he was just asked to be in a shotgun scheme and whatnot. I don't know. Excuse the noise in the background. I'm sorry. I'm outside right now, and this is the best I can do right now. I want to ask you some questions in terms of the draft and whatnot.
Yeah.
So what do y'all think about? Let me say this one first. Evan, that you was talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. Look, I know the Patriots fans, we all want him and all. Do not get me wrong, but I like Roman. What's his name? Roman Wilson from Michigan.
That's Evan's guy.
My God, I'm with you, Alex. We got to get him.
Yeah.
That one-hand catch, that did it for me. I was like, his routes, he looked so crisp doing them joints. I was just like, oh, man, can we please get him? And also, what do you think of Brandon Rice? And who was the other one? There was another one. Brandon Rice, which that's Jerry Rice's son.
Do you remember the school?
Yeah.
What school was it?
I can't think of the other receiver, though. The one receiver everybody's talking about. What's his name? Lane Conkey.
Lad McConkey. Yep, Lad McConkey from Georgia.
Oh, my God, man. I mean, I get it. I understand he's like a junior. I get it. He's always open. I get it. But I still want Roman Wilson. I want something a little different. That's just me personally. All
right, thanks for the call, William.
All right, take care now.
So it's funny he brought those two names up. I'm working on my mock draft right now. I'll give a little spoiler alert. I'm deciding between Brandon Rice and Roman Wilson, and I'm really going back and forth. Yeah. Those are two good players, as you like to say, Evan. I think that's a flavor thing, right? What do you want? They're both good, but they both win completely differently.
Yeah, I was really impressed with both of them in Mobile. I mean, Roman Wilson, as William said, is just he's crispy, right? Like his routes are just efficient, quick, sudden, all of the things that you love sets up routes fantastically well. Great ball skills. Had the one-handed catch, but he caught the ball really well all week. He's a smooth criminal out there. Like that. That's what he does. Brennan Rice is he's an X. He's a bully ball receiver. But I think what it was impressive about him, first day was a lot of contested catches, a lot of grabs through traffic and things like that. But then on day 2, he ran some routes and actually got open. I thought he got open in the red zone periods too, in day 3 a little bit. So I think he's someone that even for his size, 6'2"-ish, he can get down and he can sink and come in and out of breaks and things. I don't think he's going to be a dynamic top of the route type of guy, but for his size, I think he can do that. So it depends what they tackle in free agency. And I know that some people think it's a cop-out, but this is the biggest thing that gets on my nerves, Alex, is like we're talking about these things like free agency doesn't exist. Right. So like if they sign Michael Pittman or they sign T. Higgins or something like that,
then it's easy.
No, it's not going to be Brennan Rice, right?
Right. Shouldn't be.
If they sign Calvin Ridley, then it's probably not going to be a Roman Wilson, right? So like that's all it is. And it's good to talk about all these guys because you get all the different sort of flavors that there would be at their disposal. I still think Brennan Rice is in this class. It's such a deep receiver class. Is he a 3rd round pick? Is he maybe probably a late 3rd round pick, something like that? But I don't know if he's necessarily going to go. I think Roman Wilson could go very high, like not 1st round, but someplace in the 2nd round for sure.
I think he might fall a little bit, and that's not to say he's not a good player. I think teams value production. He does, and some of this is just the class, right? He doesn't have the production that some of these other guys do. He's a little bit on the smaller side.
Would he have had the production that some of these other guys do if he played at a different school?
Yeah, but how many teams miss that? Like, look at where Puka Nacua went last year.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. He went – I think teams are more willing to say that. Like, I look at Tank Dell, who went in the 3rd round last year. Like, Tank Dell went to Houston. They weren't a Power 5 school at the time. I think teams are more willing to look at a guy like that, whereas, like, Roman Wilson went to Michigan. So, yeah.
I know, but it's a run-first offense with J.J. McCarthy as the quarterback. Like, if Roman Wilson's getting fed the ball in CFB last year, if he's in Washington's offense, like, you imagine the numbers he would have put up with Michael Penix last year. Like, it would have been, like that's my only point. It is just it's not just the competition or anything like that. It's more just like the type of offense that he was in. They ran the ball 75% of the time.
Yeah, no, we know NFL teams don't always get this right. And Roman Wilson, we talked about J.J. McCarthy the other way.
Yeah.
Teams love J.J. McCarthy, and they're going to kind of look at Roman Wilson and be like, well, we love this quarterback. And this guy didn't really produce. So
yeah, I like Glad McConkey.
He screams. Roman Wilson screams the guy the league missed. It's not me saying I don't like him that I think he's going to fall. It's just all these receivers that we've seen fall the last few years. It's a gut thing. Like Roman Wilson to me is the guy that a year from now we're sitting here and I'm trying to make the case that the Patriots can draft some guy on day 3 instead of or in round 3 instead of round 2, and I'm sitting here saying, well, look at Roman Wilson last year. Like, he just screams that kind of guy to me.
So he's Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't think of his name. I was trying to think of his name. Thank you. Yes. Who is actually your comp for him. So perfect.
Yeah. So Ladd McConkey is I like Ladd McConkey. I think that he was a little bit more explosive, a little bit more bursty than I gave him credit for before I saw him in person. But that's such a setting that Ladd McConkey should shine in. Like, there's not a ton of contact. It's one-on-ones. Like, if you're a route runner, if you're a guy that gets open like that, you have to be able to get open in that type of setting in Mobile. Otherwise, you're really in trouble. So I don't want to put too much stock in Ladd McConkey at the Senior Bowl during one-on-ones because, like, that should be his bread and butter.
I still think he's at his best as, like, a strong number 2 receiver. I still don't know if he's a coverage dictator.
Yeah, that's more than fair.
All right. As we wrap it up here, we worked through all the calls. We worked through all the emails, again, on a very interactive Catch-22. It is Super Bowl week.
Yes.
It is Super Bowl week. We've got the Niners and the Chiefs in a couple days. We can do picks for the game, but more so, we kind of talked about it earlier, Evan. What do we learn? I say this every year. There's one big lesson learned from every Super Bowl, and it's always something different. copycat league. There's always one big lesson learned from every Super Bowl that you see kind of become, a trend or teams try to pick up on, or just a focus or something like that. And sometimes it depends who wins, or sometimes it's on who loses. The Chiefs, the Chiefs-Bucs Super Bowl in 2020, I thought kicked off a lot of, you talked about earlier, the Lions with Penei Sewell, hey, we've got to put more into building the front. Because you had the Bengals kind of get run out of the playoffs with a bad front, and then you had the Chiefs just unable to block anybody with all those weapons they had. They had peak Kelsey, peak Tyreek Hill with Patrick Mahomes, all of that. As you look at this Super Bowl, what is maybe the lesson that we're going to end up taking away from this Sunday night, that we come back here on this show next week and say, well, the Patriots should do this because of what happened in the Super Bowl?
It's a good question. I think it's going to be something that I don't necessarily subscribe to. I think it's going to be something that I'm going to end up being wrong about in at least some ways.
Yeah.
I look at it and say that it's either going to be something about defense, right? Like defense still holds up. Defense still matters.
Defense wins championships.
Yeah, whether it's Spags doing his thing or the Niners defense playing better, because they actually, the Niners defense hasn't actually been that great.
Right.
For most of the year. Or I think it could come down to these two running backs. Like, this is a really good, not that Isaiah Pacheco and Christian McCaffrey are going up against each other, but those are two really dynamic backs. And I wouldn't be surprised if we come out of this game and one of those guys is Super Bowl MVP. I wouldn't. So I think that you're going to see some of that. Kansas City, in my mind, how they've turned mostly into the Patriots of old, in my eyes, is that they've now realized that wherever their talent around Patrick Mahomes takes them, they can kind of just ebb and flow with wherever they can find the talent, right? Like, now it started with Patrick Mahomes, and it's this high flying offense. They 18-19 Kansas City is like one of the best offenses in NFL history, like up there with the 07 Patriots. Then they lose some of that offensive talent, but the board falls towards defense for them. And they add Trent McDuffie, and they add L'Jarius Sneed, and they add, they have Chris Jones there already. And now all of a sudden they're like this offense that does just enough that, we're going to score 24 on offense, and our defense is going to hold you to 21, right? Like that's like sort of what they've become.
Kind of the model that we thought the Patriots were going for the last few years.
Yeah. It seems like that's what makes the Chiefs so unique, is that like they have Mahomes, so they know that they're going to get some offense. Like they're not going to be completely shut out on offense, but they've morphed. They've changed the way that they play football now. So it's going to be interesting to see if that's going to be enough against the 49ers. I hope the big prevailing takeaway from the Super Bowl, as you know, Alex, is that Kyle Shanahan has finally anointed himself as a great head coach. That's what I hope. But I don't know if that's going to happen. So.
I got to give you the list on Shanahan, because, and we've talked about this off the air. I don't know that we've ever had this conversation on the air, but first, just my thoughts on the lessons we might learn from this Super Bowl. Outside of Mahomes, that Chiefs offense does not have a lot of talent. Really doesn't. Like, Rashee Rice is fine. I don't know that he'd be as productive anywhere else. They'd kind of have to force feed him the ball. And I really like Isaiah Pacheco, but I mean, is it that in terms of just talent outside of the quarterback position? Is it that different than what the Patriots have? Not. To which to me, the lesson would be, do everything you can to get the quarterback. Yeah. And this is looking at it through the lens of a draft guy. Do everything you can to get the quarterback, because he's going to be able to elevate. If the Niners win, the lesson is, and Evan, I actually wrote about this off an interview you had. I forget if it was Matt. I think it was Matt Groh. You interviewed Matt Groh and Cameron Williams at the Senior Bowl, and I forget which one of them gave the quote about all the teams in the final round of the playoffs have explosive playmakers on offense.
Matt Groh. Yeah.
Okay. So I took that quote, really ground level face value. All right, let's talk about the teams that made the deep. He used the word deep run, so we'll call it the Final Four.
Yeah.
49ers, their best skill position players: George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
3 of those 4 guys were not first-round picks by the Niners. The other one was a late first-round pick after they'd already established their offense. The Detroit Lions, they did use a first-round pick on Jameson Williams, but that was after they added their real weapon, their real leader offensively, Amon-Ra St. Brown, in the 4th round.
Yeah.
You look at the Chiefs. Travis Kelce, day 2 pick. Rashee Rice drafted later on. Isaiah Pacheco, 7th-round pick. The one exception may be the Ravens, because they did use a first on Zay. And I think Bateman was a first-round pick too, right?
Correct.
But you look at, they got Mark Andrews later on in the draft. They signed Odell Beckham as a free agent. These teams all do have incredible explosive players. The heavy majority of them were not first-round picks, at least not by that team. Right? McCaffrey was traded. Something like that. There's so much skill position talent coming into the league now that you don't need to use a first-round pick to get an elite playmaker. You do still have to correctly identify and develop the guy, which is where I think the Patriots have fallen short. But you do not need to use a first-round pick. Now, you look at those teams, how the quarterbacks, 3 first-round picks, and Brock Purdy is, when you have the talent the Niners have, you can trust your 7th-round quarterback. The Patriots don't have that talent.
No, you don't know what you're watching out.
I know. I'm the one who said when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt last year that Brock Purdy was going to lead them to the conference championship, by the way. I don't know what I'm watching.
He's the next Joe Montana.
3 of the 4 quarterbacks are first-round picks, or Jared Goff was traded for a first-round pick, and the offensive lines are loaded with first-round talent.
Yeah.
I think that's the lesson you learn.
Yeah, I think you're getting into this age of football in a lot of ways. You know, Lions, Niners, a lot of these teams are building up the roster around the quarterback and then just dropping in quarterbacks that, whether it's Jared Goff, Brock Purdy level or better, if they can find better. And then, I would say better would be like Stafford,
right,
at the Rams. And that's how they've built it. And I think that in a lot of ways, if you're the Patriots, you do have to look at that model and say, if we take a quarterback at 3 overall, like, are we sure that it's going to work out? Because that quarterback's going to have to cover up a lot.
But I think the lesson is, if you're not going to do that, you take a tackle, not a receiver.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, on Shanahan. Here's what's at stake. Kyle Shanahan is in his 7th year as the head coach of the Niners. He has not won a Super Bowl. He is the longest tenured NFL head coach right now, like with his team, with the team he's on, that has not won a Super Bowl. Here's the company he's approaching. There are 9 coaches in NFL history who coached somewhere for 10 years without winning a Super Bowl. It's 8, and then there's an asterisk here. Marv Levy, Marv Lewis, Ted Marchibroda, Jeff Fisher, Dan Reeves, Jason Garrett, Andy Reid in Philly. He obviously won a Super Bowl later, but Andy Reid in Philly, Dennis Green, and Jim Mora. Mike Holmgren also coached the Seahawks for 10 years, but he had previously won a title with the Packers, so I'm not counting him. My point is, this is the group. Kyle Shanahan has this Super Bowl in 2 more years to prove to me that he is not Jeff Fisher or Marv Lewis.
Oh my God, that's ridiculous.
This is his comp right now, Evan. This is his comp.
He's a better coach than Jeff Fisher. Stop it.
It has not been done a lot. Jeff Fisher's not a bad coach. He was good enough to hang around for 10 years. But these are his peers. This is his company until he wins one. And for what it's worth, so I said he's the longest. He's tied. Sean McDermott also fits in this category. They're hired the same year.
So
his company right now,
I'm rooting for in this game, and this is making me want to root for him even more.
His company right now is Sean McDermott, Marv Lewis, Jeff Fisher, Dennis Green, Jim Moore. You're going to say he's Philly Andy Reid because Andy Reid is on this list. I threw that one in for you, and you missed it.
He is. That's a comp I use all the time.
So he's got to leave San Francisco then.
No, this is his time.
He's got to leave San Francisco. So you're saying he needs Patrick Mahomes. He needs the best quarterback in the league to win a Super Bowl if he's Andy Reid.
No, he's winning the Super Bowl on Sunday.
Who you got? Real quick, who you got?
I got the Niners. Go Niners, baby. I'm a Niners fan. I'm rooting for the Niners, and I want to shut up all these narratives about my guy Kyle Shanahan, and I don't want to hear your lists anymore comparing him to Jeff Fisher and Marvin Lewis. So
it's not my list. That's a fact.
I'm picking with my heart, and I'm saying 49ers. 49ers get it done, and Kyle Shanahan finally gets it done.
So we will be watching the Super Bowl together. We will be rooting for the same team, the Niners. I'm not betting against the Chiefs. I'm not betting against Patrick Mahomes. I watched Tom Brady for 24 years playing how many of these games. I know how this works. When that guy's in this game, I know how that works. And I'm not saying Patrick Mahomes is Tom Brady, but he's this era's equivalent. I think the Chiefs win. I want the Niners to win because I want my takes about Jimmy Garoppolo and the net neutral quarterback and pass catchers on day 2. I want all that to pan out, even if it means you get your Kyle Shanahan take. But that's who I've got. Anyway, we'll be back next week. Hopefully, finally, in the same studio once again. We'll obviously have a lot more to get into personnel-wise, getting closer to free agency and the Combine. But until then, for Evan Lazar, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in. Patriots Unfiltered coming up next.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Google Play, and everywhere else you listen. Like the show? Please rate and review us. Listener comments and ratings help keep us high in the podcast rankings so new listeners can find us. Be sure to check Patriots.com for more news and more podcasts.